Namaste and good evening. I, Xavier, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav एवं नीति अनुसंधान संस्थान, Nai Delhi, extend my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI #Web Policy Talk. Today, we have gathered here for a special talk on regional futures and the dynamics of digitalization as urbanization. This discussion is a part of the series #City Conversations organized by IMPRI, Center for Habitat, Urban and Regional Studies. The moderator for today's session is Dr. Soumyadip Chattopadhyay, Associate Professor at Vishwa Bharati Shanti Niketan and Visiting Senior Fellow at IMPRI. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
We are privileged to be joined this evening by our esteemed speaker, Professor Ayona Datta, Professor of Human Geography at University College London, UK. Ma'am's broad research interests are in post-colonial urbanism, smart cities, gendered citizenship, and regional futures. Her research is set in the ethos of co-production with grassroots communities using digital mapping, visual and participatory research methods to develop and build gendered capacity in the digital and urban margins. Her research has contributed to understanding how the digital revolution in the global south has transformed everyday urban and gendered geographies. Ma'am is also the editor of the internationally referred journal Urban Geography and is on the editorial boards of several international journals such as Antipode, Dialogues in Human Geography, Digital Geography and Society, Society and Space, and Territory, Politics and Governance. In 2019, Ma'am received the Busk Medal from the Royal Geographical Society for her work on smart cities. Thank you for joining us, ma'am. Our discussants for today are Ms. Anwesha Aditi, Research Assistant, Learning from Small Cities Project at University College London, UK. Mr. Sameer Unhale, Joint Commissioner, Department of Municipal Administration at Government of Maharashtra. Dr. Surajit Chakravrarty, Associate Professor at School of Public Policy, Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi, and Professor Tathagata Chatterji, Professor of Urban Management and Governance at Xavier Institute of Management, Bhubaneswar. A very warm welcome to all our discussants. Now, I invite Dr. Soumyadip to proceed with the deliberation. We look forward to learning from our esteemed gathering. Thank you, and over to you, sir.
Thank you, Xavier, and a very good evening to all of you from Shanti Niketan. And on behalf of the Center for Habitat, Urban and Regional Studies at IMPRI, I welcome you all to this City Conversation series. And this City Conversation series engages in dialogues and debates on key challenges and opportunities regarding sustainable urban development, municipal governance, and the related issues. And IMPRI invites a wide range of stakeholders such as the practitioners, academia, representatives of civil society organizations, international organizations, think tanks in this series. And today's topic of discussion is very interesting. And this urbanization and digital transformation, as we know, are two essential features of today's world. Digitalization is considered as one of the key enablers of sustainable development of cities' socioeconomic dynamics. And there is a growing body of research that has highlighted the significance of digitalization, the use of data and digital technology to build a more efficient and livable urban environment and manage the impact of rapid urbanization, demographic and climate change. And many cities are in fact investing in digital technology to improve urban planning, to foster equitable economic growth, and to deliver services more efficiently. And more comprehensive spatial information can provide better assessments of development issues across different scales. For example, the place-based inequalities between neighborhoods and their aggregate expression at the city level. Now, this pandemic has served to bring many of these challenges into sharp focus. So in a sense, this digitalization promises to revolutionize this urban planning and policy in general, and the way citizens and stakeholders live, work, and collaborate and communicate in particular. But there are several complexities as well. These are related to issues of, say, the capacity building, then multi-stakeholder coordination. Most of the cities are, as we know, are struggling with fragmented management and lack of integrated strategic vision and practice. The models of governance remain largely ad hoc. So these are also there are also problems of digital illiteracy and these barriers in access to devices that limit access to information and increase the vulnerabilities. Now, this may exacerbate the existing inequalities and forego the economic and civic solutions that are fair and inclusive. So, in fact, but we are yet to fully comprehend these complexities. For example, how does the use of new data help to fill gaps in knowledge and shape urbanization? How can new data help public and the private stakeholders to develop services that are better adapted to citizens' need and promote sustainable urban development? Then how do the digital technologies and their uses contribute to the strengthening of the urban planning and management, and how these new forms of urban practices which are co-produced with the emergence of this data-driven urbanism, and most importantly, does this digitalization increase or reduce the socio-spatial inequalities? Now, to understand some of these issues, we are fortunate to be joined by Professor Ayona Datta and some of the India's leading urban experts and practitioners. And today's topic of discussion is regional futures and the dynamics of digitalization as urbanization. So with these few words, I once again welcome you all to this city conversation series, and it's over to Professor Datta for your lecture. So it's over to you, ma'am.
Thanks. Thanks for inviting me to this really interesting series. I had a look earlier and I saw that I'm part of a long line of very important speakers before me. So thanks again. I really appreciate you reaching out, particularly in a context where we're all kind of homebound. We've been homebound for 2 years, and it's really great to be able to have these conversations internationally. So what I will do is I'll share my screen now so then I can talk through some of the stuff. So you can see this, right? Great. So what I want to talk about today is, of course, regional futures, and it's kind of a development of some of the work that we've been doing in several projects in the past few years. I want to suggest today that we need to think beyond just the urban. We need to think beyond the urban into the regions, because the urban has a much wider footprint. And the key argument is that this urbanization or the regional feature that we might imagine, not just in India, but generally across the global South, has to be thought through with a process of digitalization that's been shaping governance and territorialization for a very, very long time, but also much more significantly and intensely for the past decade or so. So the talk is Regional Futures, the Dynamics of Digitalization as Urbanization in the Global South. And I just wanted to start with thanking some of the funders, ERC, which is the European Research Council, the UK Economic and Social Research Council, and the British Academy. Some of these three have been funders, very generous funders of the work that we've done so far. So just to start with the idea of digitalization as urbanization, I want to again reiterate that in the last 2 decades, there's been a continuous push from global organizations such as United Nations, World Bank, etc., and even national governments towards what Owen calls a technological entrepreneurialism, telling municipalities again and again to adapt digitalization or die. So you need to get digitalization fully implemented in municipal systems. And in line with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, The UN recommends that future territorial strategies should have a focus on subnational productivity and competitiveness, enhanced very crucially by digital technologies. So digital technologies, as you've already highlighted, Soumyadip, is here to stay. But initiatives to adopt smart technologies in local governments start with the claim that the opportunities that are being presented by digitalization will resolve all the challenges of urbanization. And again, as you very rightly highlighted, and many scholars have already highlighted, that this is not necessarily a simple function of digitalization equals to urbanization or vice versa. It does not necessarily resolve the challenges because we're probably not asking the right kinds of questions. So what is digitalization? It's been defined various ways by different scholars, but I'm adopting the current one by Virunen and Carr, saying that digitalization is the transformation of all sectors of our economy, government, and society based on the large-scale adoption of existing and emerging digital technologies. This is largely, of course, attributed to what is called the fourth industrial revolution, where the proliferation of technologies has led to transformation in all aspects of municipal governance. Digitalization, therefore, is now seen to have brought about a fundamental transformation in the ways that the state sees, represents, and governs its territories and populations. So much of the way that the state now understands who is its citizen, who is its subject, but also what are the geographies that the subject belongs to, is often seen through the lens of digital technologies. And in the last decade or so, encounters with digital and information technologies have transformed municipal governance, particularly recently with the kind of current policies around smart cities, digital India, etc. But what I want to also argue that these come at the back of long accumulative histories of information revolution in the global South. But the lack of attention to these kind of dynamics of what is now understood as a digital turn in urbanization or even in urbanism, but also generally a digital turn in all aspects of society, has really not enabled us to get to grips with what are really the challenges of municipal governance, what are its fault lines, what are also perhaps some of its strengths. But then again, what we have lost out primarily as a result of this is the implications that this has on regional urbanization or metropolitan urban growth. And this, I argue, is a major gap in current urban and regional studies. So my talk today will suggest that we are seeing the emergence of a logics of digitalization as urbanization, that these two processes are appearing very much in tandem with each other, not necessarily parallel and independent, but very much connected to each other. That the transition to automated planning processes in metropolitan regions and its impact on regional urbanization cannot be separately understood. I want to highlight three different aspects. The first is the rescaling of the state within automated governance and planning systems. That is the kind of the crux of how the state has itself transformed with digital technologies. And B, I want to highlight that the governance of information infrastructures has always been fractured and always been a challenge for regional futures, because we are in a legacy of colonial governance, which has largely been paper-based. And so what we are seeing now is more or less hybrid paper and digital information systems, which are not, again, necessarily speaking to each other seamlessly. And the third point, C, is how then this impacts on the governance of digital territorial peripheries that are leading to a number of hybrid subaltern politics around digitalization, but also territorialization, the kind of land appropriation, evictions, et cetera, et cetera. So my main take-home message here today is that contemporary urbanization in the global South is both a product, but also a producer of the information revolution that we see around us. So even as digitalization and urbanization have become intricately linked, the digital has also now pervaded every aspect of state bureaucracy. The last 2 decades of rolling out of e-governance across the global South has enabled the state across all scales, from the local, the urban, regional, to the federal scale, to alter the terms and conditions of what was its earlier developmental agenda or welfarist agenda. And as Pradeep Thomas argues, digitalization of the state through e-governance and a shift to digitized service and welfare access embodied what he says, quote, a deeply rooted technological determinism that assumes that the layering of ICTs in development will automatically solve the many issues related to the provision of access to this information. And there are, of course, many, many critiques of e-governance, which we are very familiar with, because they kind of have highlighted the fault lines of this digital divide, the people who have access and people who don't have access, people who have the capacity and people who don't have the capacity. That reinforces existing societal hierarchies that we see currently shaping our sort of subaltern politics. And the development challenges thereby then faced by municipalities are numerous. They are numerous in delivering online citizen services, taxation, revenues, property registers, ID, income taxes, but they have not paid attention to the ways that this actually transforms the nature of urbanization of the region. And there's been a lot of talk about Aadhaar and a lot of talk about various aspects of society, but the links to urbanization is perhaps not as much talked about. In India, particularly, where e-governance was initiated over 2 decades ago, recently 2 national programs, as you all know, Digital India and 100 Smart Cities, which was launched in 2014, gave new directives for geospatialization of metropolitan regions and the growth of greenfield urbanization. Large-scale adoption of digital infrastructures and platforms across state departments was specifically directed towards mapping informal settlements and property ownership, because property ownership increases the tax base as well. So this has led to the emergence of new kinds of state spaces within these municipalities, such as the new ITGIS departments that are evident in particularly in smaller peripheral municipalities, that are created particularly for the purpose of producing detailed geospatial maps of metropolitan regions. And these initiatives thereby have profoundly transformed the dynamics of urbanization by rescaling regional governance to local municipalities, decommissioning paper-based planning processes and diversifying territorial information, and therefore literally automating new kinds of urban futures, particularly in the peripheries of metropolitan regions. So today I wanted to think about this process, not exactly talking in depth about any kind of the work that we've done, but kind of drawing upon all the work that we've done and kind of giving a couple of arguments around this. So I'm drawing upon a number of projects where my collaborators and I have been working on smart cities initiatives to really understand how the tools and technologies of digitalization have been used to imagine, govern, and live in the future smart city. We've studied a number of cities, interviewed a range of state and non-state actors, starting from municipal commissioners, smart city CEOs, officials in the mayor's offices, civil servants in different state departments, private sector actors, professionals, ITGIS actors, civil society actors, but also hawkers, vendors, shopkeepers, and all sorts of ordinary citizens, all of who have been directly or indirectly stakeholders in this process of digitalization as urbanization. And we have focused mostly on smaller cities, the tier 2 cities in India, because these are the ones that are most affected by the digitalization as urbanization process. And these are largely the ones who are most faced by the challenges of digitalization, since they have lesser resources, lesser capacity, and so on. And these also are the ones that have been commissioned to prepare new master plans in conjunction, often with smart city projects, through a full automation of governance and planning. So our work has been mainly with these smaller cities that are in the process rather than having reached the kind of ultimate of digitalization in their governance and planning. And one of those cities that I'll talk about today is Bhiwandi, but I mean, we've looked at several cities. And here, this is a slide of the methodologies that we've used. As you can see, there's numerous methodologies, multi-method analysis, and starting, as I said, with the interviews, but we did extensive GIS mapping, which really was looking at the historiography of urban transformations, drawing upon census data, drawing upon physical infrastructures, drawing upon regional satellite images, looking at how urban growth has happened over decades. Then we also used a software called Map My Assets, which was very much a kind of participatory grassroots software that participants could use to actually map their tangible or even intangible assets in the cities that they belonged to, even photographs, voice notes, videos, etc. We did a number of community asset mapping workshops with our local citizen civil society actors, stakeholders in these cities. And then, of course, as I suggested, we did a number of stakeholder workshops, especially with some civil servants, showing our findings and having discussions with them. So in all of these cities, what we found was that these cities are all marked by the geographies and historiographies of colonization. They're marked by urban uneven development and a fragmented digital revolution, particularly in local governments. And thus they presented us very important insights into the processes of this connection between digitalization and urbanization. And so these cities, as I argued already, they have strategic regional plans in place for urbanizing their principal peripheral regions. Either they want to do this through industrial development or through greenfield development or through mega infrastructure projects. And this has been kind of evident repeatedly in several of our cities. These are also municipalities which hold mainly agricultural and industrial economies. For example, Bhiwandi is a very good, very classic case of that. It has a very strong Palum sector that's kind of a really historical legacy, but it's also got peripheral villages that's mainly agricultural based. But Bhiwandi is also the hub of e-commerce in India and perhaps even in South Asia, where all the Amazon and Flipkart e-commerce warehouses have relocated there. So looking at cities like this, what we understand is they produce for the first time a really interesting comparative reading of cities that are rapidly transforming across the global South, rapidly digitalizing, rapidly expanding their urban growth. And they present us with both exemplary but also paradigmatic cases of digitalization and digitalization of two things, digitalization of information, but also digitalization of territory. So let's start with information, and particularly information, what I would suggest following upon Susan Leigh-Starr's work on information infrastructures. You know, what are the information infrastructures that make this connection between digitalization and urbanization, particularly in municipal governance? And I would argue that information infrastructures are not seamless between paper and digital, and they are always existing as hybrid information systems. Starting particularly from early colonial mapping to the establishment of census and data sets to most recent initiatives of e-governance, the governance of information in various forms and formats has often, maybe perhaps always, established the rule of law and power of the state. And as Albert Meijer wrote, the state enacts what he quotes, a politics of data collection, data storage, data usage, data visualization, and data access, unquote, through its information infrastructures. So governance of information is more than just verifying its kind of integrity or verifiability. It is what Agarwal and Kumar have argued. It is a political weapon whereby information infrastructures reveal new territories and populations that are ripe for governance. So information is not simply instantaneously challenged. It is bound to infrastructures of indexing, coding, storage, retrieval, analysis, representation, and even destruction. So I want to argue that information infrastructures are produced often through the standardization of its own standardization and rigidity, and therefore it's fundamentally relational. Any kind of information that we have about territories, about geographies, particularly around the peripheral territories, is fundamentally relational to what can or cannot be made visible about these territories, what can or cannot be knowable about these territories. Susan Leigh Starr, particularly, whose work is well established in the context of information infrastructures, describes information infrastructures as both, quote, material artifacts collected by people, constructed by people, and, quote, a trace or record of activities. And most recently, information infrastructures, therefore, are described as, quote, the whole array of organizational forms, practices, and institutions that accompany, make possible, and inflect the development of new technology, their related practices, and their distributions. So taken together, it can be understood that new technologies continuously change the ontological reality of information in ways that make the distinction between information and storytelling and the inherent logics, produce the inherent logics or the contradiction of digital age or the digitalization of information. Now, we have a lot of work done already in anthropology on the paper state, on the everyday state, particularly around paper infrastructures. And these anthropologies of everyday state examine paper as a site of bureaucracy, but they don't necessarily investigate its role or relationship to actual digitalized state spaces. So you have the work of many people like Akhil Gupta or Matthew Hull, or even Annika Mathur, who looks at the paper infrastructures of knowledge and how the state uses paper bureaucracy in a way to govern. But it's not really clear how does that then flow into becoming digital information, which then is also used by the local governance or even state or federal governance to govern its territories and populations. Paper in its materiality, as well as in its kind of semiotic and symbolic forms, assembles specific flows of information between state institutions and civil society. Paper establishes mechanisms of power, control, and authority, both for those who hold them, but also for those who are denied its possession. Yet transferring information held in paper to digital formats means developing new infrastructures for digital storage, retrieval, quality control, data assurance, and secure transmission. And these are some of the municipal record rooms in places like Jalandhar, Shimla, etc., which hold decades, and particularly for Shimla, hundreds of years of municipal records on land ownership, planning permissions, planning permits. On the left, you see maps of unauthorized colonies in Jalandhar held for many, many years. How was this information being actually transferred, translated into digital formats, into GIS maps that are then used to govern, to see, to visualize particular territories by the state? So transferring information held in paper to digital formats means developing new infrastructures. But in this process, paper can simultaneously lose meaning as well as acquire increased value within digitalization processes. So while paper records are destroyed, audit trails can be broken, the materiality of paper loses value sometimes in strategic planning. But the information infrastructures of paper remain key to the verifiability of digital information, particularly in information scarce regions. So if you go to the slums or squatter settlements, paper documentation hold really increased value because those are the documentations that can sometimes prove claims to particular kinds of land, particular kinds of property. So although across India, there are several challenges to the digitalization of land and property records due to often mutilation or missing paper documents, customary land occupation, multiple claims to same property, mismatch between paper and geospatial maps, and often also poor digital capacity of municipal officials to read these digital data. Yet, when it faces significant challenges of physical storage, maintenance, and indexing, the process of settling these contested claims have always been to trace what Emma Tarlow has argued, the paper truths. Let's go back to the paper document and see what it has said. And if the paper document doesn't exist, then rights or claims to particular kinds of lands and properties also is deemed to not exist. So let's take the case of Bhiwandi Municipal or Bhiwandi Nizampur metropolitan area, which is really at this point at a really early stage of municipal digitalization and initialization of sort of its own automated planning systems. And this is on the left-hand side, a screenshot from their website, which says we are on a mission to digitalize Bhiwandi city. And this is sort of you can see when you go to the departments, they have got this new departments of IT, and they are trying to transfer all of the paper documentation that they hold into machine readable or GIS readable documentation. Bhiwandi recorded 709,000 population in 2011 census, and we're still waiting for the 2021 census records. But it also has a floating population of 800,000 migrant men coming to work in its powerloom factories and warehouses, living mainly in informal settlements that are as yet unmapped and therefore invisible to these paper documents or even to digital documents. Although Bhiwandi in the past has been bypassed repeatedly by national urban development policies, including the earlier JNNURM program of e-governance, and most recently the 100 Smart Cities initiative does not include Bhiwandi, but under the National Land Records Modernization Program, that is the NLRMP of the Government of India, Bhiwandi has embarked upon scanning and digitalization all of its land records. The aim is to automate land records, establish a modern record room, digitalize cadastral maps, integrate textual and spatial data, computerize registration, and integrate all of this with core GIS and capacity building initiatives. Yet in 2015, it was found that electronic records were being manipulated, and therefore the municipality switched to paper records as authentic proof of documentation. But despite this, in 2020, the newly elected municipal government embarked on a full digitalization program in line with the National Digital India Initiative to create what they called, quote, the first Bhiwandi Strategic Master Plan of 2036. Sorry, I'm just looking at the chat. I thought this was a warning for time to me. I don't know how we're doing on time. So the Bhiwandi case then is a striking example of structural, social, and territorial peripheralization, presenting stark disparities even with other municipalities. We will examine the challenges that has already presented to municipal officials with very low digital capacity, charged with digitalization of paper documents, and they're charged with producing the strategic and land use planning frameworks. And for the first time now, Bhiwandi has launched into kind of physical survey and actually saying, well, let's not just go by this paper data because paper data may be incomplete. Let's actually do a first physical survey of Bhiwandi metropolitan area in order to put this on a GIS map. So governing information, therefore, involves temporal rescaling of state spaces and networks, since state actors must work with the differential rhythms of state spaces in order to bring them within what Sarah Sharma has called speedy time of automated planning. While municipal officials and state departments have been slowly digitizing paper records, maps, lists, forms, and other forms of information in digital formats in order to automate bureaucracy and citizen services, these processes of information retrieval, translation into digital formats, and integration with centralized systems, as I said, are not often seamless and often highly selective. So the tempos of state departments working with bureaucratic mechanisms of paper while slowly and laboriously transferring paper into digitalized formats, civil servants are grappling with the demands of new apps while maintaining the flow of communications across state spaces. And the tempos of paper information vis-a-vis digital data, the tempos of territorial information captured through satellites and drones vis-a-vis that of everyday life in the metropolitan peripheries, all of these sort of conflicts and contestations reveal the multiple asynchronicities of digitalization as urbanization. So none of these are matching in sort of the temporal rhythms that would be required in order to enable this speedy time. And here we have a quote from one of the kind of IT professionals, who says different departments are the custodians of different data and of areas of concern. For example, transport is going to look after the development of buses, the bus shelters, of the bus stops, and the other IT infrastructure type that is to be developed within the buses. And from the transport point of view, likewise, some of the chapters such as garbage collection and the composters, they are being done by a municipal corporation. And thirdly, some of the projects such as junctions, etc., they are improvement of junction separators, footpaths. These things are being looked after by the Public Works Department. And as far as the IT sector is concerned, we are having the Department of IT. And it sort of goes on to say that it's very, very difficult to work together in this, even though the GIS map is supposed to be integrating all of this. Each of these departments hold different kinds of information, often in paper format, and translation of this and coordination of all of this together into digital format is highly complex and contested. So this takes me to my second point, which is the point of the governing of digital territorial margins. And while the digital margins does not seamlessly overlay on the territorial margins, there is a high degree of correlation between the digital and the territorial. So in the peripheries of metropolitan regions, for example, which constitute also the territorial margins of these metropolitan regions, you see also the digital margins, lack of access to digital technologies, to digital infrastructure, but also to various other kinds of physical infrastructures that we know of. So what and how does the state or the local state govern the digital territorial peripheries in this context of digitalization? And the key mechanism, of course, has been to automate urbanization in its peripheries through land appropriation, rezoning, and recategorization. As Isa Baud argues, digitalization seeks to manage spatial information in order to identify territories that are suitable for expansion and growth. Territory here, following Stuart Eldon, is best understood through an examination of the relation of the state to the emergence of what he suggests, a category of space that is defined by particular ways of seeing land and terrain through digital technologies. So seeing land and terrain through the GIS platform. For Stuart Eldon, territory is a political technology. It enables a particular technical and legal apparatus of the state that is strategic. In a digitalizing state, territory refers to the terrain of municipal power and governance, charting the boundaries and borders of urbanization and metropolitan expansion through digital infrastructure or digital portals like the Esri GIS maps. And one of these attempts in opening new territories has been in the digitization of land records, the cadastral maps, and so on. For example, as Marina Richter has found in the Bhumi project in India's regional state of Karnataka, which attempted to digitalize all of its land ownership records. But in doing so, the state charted new and hybrid constructions of the territory, both in terms of those earlier invisible on property records, as well as those unable to consent to or challenge their inclusion in new updated property bases. In our work in India's small cities, these digital territorial margins are always under expansion in order to see and govern even newer territories and spaces. And so the reach and influence of the state is always expanding, particularly in the use of these digital infrastructures. And here we see an example of a command and control center that is kind of attempting to have ubiquitous vision in the way that the state sees its city, its citizens, and all sorts of infrastructures in order to efficiently govern and manage the working of the city. This is a quote again from one of the IT professionals, and he says, I think that ICCC, which is the Integrated Command and Control Center, will be a wonderful thing to happen because I can know what's happening in the city and where. That will give me 10 extra hands to work with and a lot of information. I can't patrol the entire city daily, so this will allow me to get details and inputs from different centers, what's going on and if there are any problems. This will widen our reach. This will also improve our interaction with the public. So this is an IT professional who's also working very closely with the municipal commissioner and with the CEO of the smart city. And therefore, it's sort of the private sector is in a way entangled with the state, and it's very difficult to extricate them and separate them as different entities in this kind of context. And the regimes of power that are embedded in these governance of digital territorial margins, therefore, need to include these other actors and stakeholders, such as these professionals who work beyond the state. And because of its digitalization imperative, the state is now in partnership with these global IT corporations, these local professionals. But the global IT corporations, particularly such as Google Maps, Google, Esri, that provide the platforms for ArcGIS, gives access to vast reservoirs of data that are and can be seen to be what is called now born digital. They're no longer starting from paper documentation. They are born digital. They're directly transferred into the portals. Municipalities across the global south have invested substantial budgets in building these digital record rooms, establishing centralized digital information systems and automated planning processes. And private corporations collecting and building these databases, therefore, not just hold power and control over the stories that are told by the state, but also how the state sees its territory and its population. They also direct real-time conversations about information across different state spaces because they are the providers of these communication infrastructures. So the capacities of private corporations enable them to not just provide the digital information infrastructures, but also build, develop, and manage new customized information infrastructures for the state. This often leaves the local state in a position of path dependency and continued lack of digital capacity while it supports this new world of big governments, IT functions, and their relationships with big service providers. So here we have born digital data. This is the comprehensive mapping of Jalandhar, where the paper documentation was set aside and it was started from scratch. And this is again a GIS consultant who's working with the local municipality. Who says the most ambitious smart city project in Jalandhar is the utility mapping through ground penetration radar. It's a method through which we're able to scan the utilities up to 5 meters underground, depending on the construction material used. The experts then interpret the image and identify what kinds of utilities are present, example, water, sewer, gas, internet cable, etc. Right now, the project is on hold because the client is not assured of 100% accuracy of data, but we can assure up to 95% accuracy. So the digitalization of local government, even when it's born digital, it's still inconsistent, incomplete, and highly contested, and often reinforces what Veena Das and Deborah Poole in their work have called the illegibility of the state. First, because colonial and even post-colonial governments were built largely on paper, or colonial governments were solely built on paper, which was essential for documenting and record keeping of information about its territories. And therefore, paper documents such as letters, memos, notices, logs, lists, gazettes, cadastral maps, etc., they are still ordinary aspects of governing territory in the global south. And more fundamentally, because despite increased automation of governance, the local state cannot bypass what they have as the burden of paper, which still overruns its own bureaucracies. So while the information revolution in local governance has triggered a large-scale decommissioning of paper documents, but as Sellon and Harper noted a decade ago, it is unlikely that digitalization will totally replace paper very soon. Rather, the state is continuously engaged in smoothing the tensions between two seemingly asynchronous information infrastructures, one of paper on the one side, which has its files, permits, memos, etc. And the other hand, you have the digital, that is the Wi-Fi, the secure networks, the passwords, the apps, platforms, cloud storage, smartphones, and of course, the command and control rooms. So indeed, paper as material information has become even more salient as historical facts, verifying or obscuring contested information that is born digital. So paper as material infrastructures of documentation can be transformed into spatial knowledge selectively or even in a contested way, because these geospatial maps and dashboards and platforms constitute only a selective way of seeing and knowing and governing. So here we have another one, and this is actually from Delhi's smart city zone, which is the central zone. The IT consultant says, when it comes to physical infrastructure, improvement of road or junction or anything, if you do not empower or if you don't build the capacity in the corporation, then it's impossible. And any external agency is external to them. We don't know what's going on. The municipality know better because they're doing it every day and night. It is an internal thing. We can't suggest this. But as a top-down approach, ICCC will be successful, not the other thing. So not the other kind of smart sewage system or the kind of smaller packages of this digital infrastructures. And so there remains the conundrum and the paradox of digitalization as urbanization, that while digitalization aims to govern territory, fully govern territory by fully knowing, it can never fully know because it is always relational and selective, and it always will have a contested relationship with the legacy of paper. So just to sum up, then finally, today I've examined the emergence of a digitalization and urbanization imperative in India, and more broadly in the global South through the dynamics of its assemblage across local state spaces and scales, across public and private stakeholders, across paper and digital information infrastructures, and also across a kind of political, technological, and political economic terrain of the state. And I want to argue that digitalization is not just an extension of the developmental state or the neoliberal or even the welfare state. Rather, it's a fundamental reorganization of state spaces, bureaucracies, information, and territories. Digitalization produces a rescaling of the state that is directed towards regional urbanization through automated planning and governance systems. It transforms not just state-citizen relationships, but fundamentally also transforms state-state relationships and political and technological exchanges. So technology is often seen as this kind of neutral, unbiased medium, but technology itself becomes a political tool in order to see and govern and know. So this is what I have called the digitalization and urbanization policies of the local state. Initiatives that are geared towards generating regional urbanization and digitally orientated futures by expanding the jurisdictional territory of the everyday state. Digitalization as urbanization initiatives use the apparatus of governance across two realms, one being information infrastructures and the other being digital territorial peripheries. The former entails a recalibration of the timescape of the local state space between analog forms to governance by files, memos, and paper into the flows of digital data across cloud platforms. And significantly, this recalibration occurs not just across information infrastructures, but also across multiple state spaces. Seeing digitalization, therefore, through the mechanisms of information enables us to develop what Ray Connell has talked about as southern theories of urbanization. But these southern theories of urbanization so far has not looked at its complex relationship with digital infrastructures. And that's really my argument today, that digitalization enables us to direct our attention to the entanglements of governance with digital revolution across all scales of the state that has transformed both the state in the global South and its territorial politics in the metropolitan urban peripheries. And I'll stop here. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for your very interesting presentation and all the thought-provoking ideas. Like it's completely a new territory because, yeah, all of us are very much familiar with these digitalization experiences, but we are not very much sure about how it actually unfolds or how it actually impacts the urban planning and this the making of the city, because you talked about the importance of understanding cities not only as the product but also at the as the processes of city making. And you have rightly pointed out that digitalization does not necessarily solve the problem of these urbanization, the challenges of urbanization that most of the cities in global souths are facing. And you have just mentioned some of the key points, is like you have mentioned about the governance of information and infrastructure. You talked about the information infrastructure are not often seamless between paper infrastructure and digital information. And it has got important implications, which has been quite evident from your presentation, as far as how these are used by the state to govern its citizen. You talked about these examples from Bhiwandi, this is a very interesting example of how the manipulation of e-documents and the fragmented structure of data creeping, which led to some sort of conflicts and contestation of the digitalization as urbanization, and ultimately making the coordination, which is very much essential for city making processes, impossible practically when we are trying to use this digitalization to improve or rather, as I mentioned, like to revolutionize this entire urban planning and policy from options. And also you talked about the governing issues of these digital territory, governing issues of digital territorial margins. For example, you give some examples of how the state is partnering with different private corporators, giving them access to huge set of data. And you rightly mentioned that it gives them some important insights on how the state is saying its territory. So that's the very interesting thing, and how it produces, which you have mentioned, the customized infrastructure at the city level, though they do not always match the needs of the citizens. So these are very interesting, important thought, and I'm sure that we have a very important, very distinguished set of panelists who will be throw some more lights into your discussion. So let me start with Professor Tathagata Chatterji. If you so please reflect on Professor Datta's presentation today. It's over to you. Yes.
Thank you, Soumyadip. It has been really a very fascinating presentation by Professor Ayona Datta. And let's really, I mean, there had been a huge push towards digitalization in recent decades in India. And I mean, we can trace back the digitalization push on the cities to the JNNURM mission. Which first thought about improving the capacity of the urban local bodies by bringing in e-governance. And in the state of Andhra Pradesh particularly, there was a major push towards Vizag, turning Vizag city government capacities in providing a whole range of citizen services. After the 2014 elections, I mean, the push towards digitalization has reached kind of, I would say, a new crescendo. So it is seen as a major tool towards nation building, you know, with some sort of a reimagination of new India. So, like, you know, I mean, Prime Minister Nehru's push as dams and power plants as the temples of modern India. So, and the digital technology has somewhat become the nation building equivalent in the present times. The AMRUT, the successor project to JNNURM, has again given a big push to the digitalization agenda in the cities by pushing for the GIS maps for the cities. And of course, you know, in the smart cities mission has brought in new capacities through the by putting in place the integrated command and control centers. Now, in this integrated command and control centers, indeed, you know, I mean, became quite useful during the pandemic times, and as Professor Dutt has also mentioned, I mean, they were repurposed within a very short time to manage the quarantine, manage the movement of the people, and also in some cases to deliver um, foods and essential supplies to the people. But when it comes to the cities, particularly small and medium-sized cities here that we see in Odisha, what we see that in almost all cases, this digital push are being done through by outsourcing the task to consultants. And in almost in all urban local bodies, there is a consultant from someone from the consultant's office who is sitting and who is actually in charge of this digitalization work. I mean, the point very rightly mentioned by Professor Dutt. But one question comes up here is that what does it lead to the urban local bodies? This knowledge is being created by the knowledge is there, but I mean, it is being digitalized by the consultant, and it is being managed by the consultant. So what is the role of the urban local body here? And does it really have the capacity to use or internalize this new knowledge? So, or it becomes more further dependent upon the consultants. The second point that I would like to make here is that digitalization is indeed reconfiguring the role of the state, and it has substantially strengthened the role of the state. And here also, it is, I see that it is also leading to a further centralization. Is that here that is the urban local bodies are seen as only as a conduit for delivery of the delivery of the infrastructure services. So, but the capacity of the urban local bodies towards engagement of the people, towards participation, those aspects are not getting emphasized. It is the digital aspects, the digital revolution is pushing to some extent to see the people as customers, but people are not being seen as citizens. So, I mean, that is another thing. When we are pushing towards e-governments, but people are being seen more as customers of infrastructure, but not as direct participants in the governance. So these are some of my small observations.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Professor Chatterji, for highlighting the importance of the issues related to the nature and mode of knowledge creation under this drive towards digitalization, and also the ultimately it is actually facilitating the process of decentralization of the urban policy and policy making. So I'm sure that Professor Datta will come back to your observation or on observation rightly. But before that, let me request Dr. Anwesha Aditi, if you please come in and share your views. Yeah.
Please unmute.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, sure. So I think Professor Ayona correctly mentioned as to how with urbanization, we should necessarily not just focus on urbanization, but then we should broaden our vision of development to the peri-urban areas or the regional areas. And it also has to be looked through the lens of digitalization. And also not just smartness or digitalization refer to a growing a growing urbanization will not just qualify as being urbanized if it's just being digitalized. Also, I believe that recently we have seen this shift from analog form to a digital form also during the pandemic period, when we started connecting to the world virtually. Also, the smart cities have, since the onset of the smart cities project in 2014, the concept of smartness was infused with the idea of digital initiatives being put in, so that the basic urban service delivery was facilitated with certain information technologies and other digital initiatives. Uh, Also, as we are talking about information infrastructure, and how these tier 2 cities were very important, and they were most particularly faced by the digital innovations and how they tackled. I think one of the best examples is how these smart cities kind of dealt with the pandemic while they set up the integrated command and control centers, and how GIS as a platform was used primarily to deal with certain issues. Also, a responsible development or planning will require some robust planning initiatives, which will need to be updated and refined with time. And I guess with digital technologies and with GIS, I think this updation of data becomes really helpful. And this ongoing challenge has made this tool very important. So in various smart cities, for example, in my past project, I was working in Varanasi, wherein I saw that with the onset of the pandemic, they kind of started mapping all of their infrastructure, the cases which included the deceased or the affected on their GIS platform. Also, Mumbai also kind of incorporated the Municipal Corporation of Greater Mumbai also infused the system of GIS with their many other applications, such as the property tax system, then the command and control center. So this was one of the ways wherein they kind of assisted in dealing with the ongoing activities of urban services, while also I think they kind of introduced various dashboards wherein vital statistics were mapped. So that also gave a better transparency in terms of the numbers, and how people could see the real scenario in front of them. So I think this fragmented digital revolution in the small cities kind of took a great kickstart, and it pushed ahead. So yeah, while with this, I wanted to understand how there is a gap between our understanding of digitalization and smartness in the smart cities. So how we could deal, or how we could handle this in the future while we are planning for our urban futures or regional futures, like Professor Ayona told. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing some positives regarding how this entire thrust towards digitalization can be utilized to strengthen the urban policy making, and how this can be useful when bringing in the much needed transparency in this entire policy framework. So thank you once again for sharing your thoughts. And now let us move, or let us now request, let me request Dr. Surajit Chakravrarty, if you please chip in and share your comments.
Please unmute, Dr. Surajit.
Thanks. Hi, everyone, and thanks, Professor Datta, for that engaging talk. I have a few reactions, which are, completely unscripted. They're just, the thoughts that I had on hearing what you were saying. The 3 or 4 of them, and I'll just go in the order that they came to me. And I hope it makes sense. I mean, a lot of these are just, unprocessed questions. They're not answers. I don't expect a definitive answer in this forum right here, but it's just something for us all to think about, I suppose. So I agree with you, and I don't think there's anybody here who doesn't regarding this. reification and almost fetishization of technology to the point where technology in itself seems to become the goal rather than the best use to which it can be put. And one of the places where you see that, for example, is with GIS, where a lot of good can come of it, but as Professor Chatterji just said, and as Anwesha also said, the power of GIS is when you start using it for when you start putting data sets into it that reflect the unevenness of social outcomes, of spatial outcomes, and so on, and the maps that those data sets can generate are significantly different in terms of the information they provide decision makers than other maps. And so having GIS in itself is not a guarantee of a just or sustainable outcome. We also have to use it in a certain manner. And these kinds of things can be said about almost all kinds of these new texts that we are using in the urban context. So that's one thing, and then another. And here it's I don't know, it's a bit of a question, I suppose. You mentioned something about asynchronicity. I don't know if that's a word or I just made it up, but asynchronicity between data and what vision of reality the data is creating for decision makers or for planners versus the reality on the ground, and that those two things don't really match up. But just to be a little provocative here, I mean, wasn't that the case before tech came into the picture in a big way? Like, and is the problem with tech, or is the problem, does it lie somewhere else? And if it does lie somewhere else, maybe even partially, what do we do to get tech into the hands or into the mindsets where better outcomes can be reached? So that anyway, so that's one second question. And then a third question is this phrase came up 2 or 3 times, automation of planning. And I just wanted to ask if you really meant automation of planning or automation of governance, because as an urban planner, I see the two things as not exactly the same thing. So I'd like to that's just a simple clarification. And then fourthly, the point about the digital territorial margins, which, as I understand, I think you were saying that, I mean, they're both kinds of marginalizations, and to an extent, they do overlap, but not entirely, but there are significant overlap. And I'm trying to think through that and also wondering how we read these scales. Is it that the periphery is getting further marginalized? Or is it that there is a sort of a bigger core or an outer core occurring where there are other geographies that are even more marginalized on the other side of the digital divide? And these peripheries and these small towns are actually, quote unquote, winners in that in the payoffs of this implementation. And I feel like we would gain a lot more by knowing what people on the ground think, the users of, especially in these small towns, which are small towns but at the periphery of big towns rather than further away. Do they feel that they've got something out of it? Because it's really easy to I mean, I don't mean to but it's there is a lot of critique and valid critique, but isn't anything coming out of it? And if there is, then how do we refocus our attention towards that, and not to undermine the critique, but to learn from it and improve things. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Surajit, for just throwing these three important questions. And now let me move over to Mr. Samir Unhale. If you please share your thoughts. Yeah, and also I request you to share your thoughts within 8 minutes. So please. Yes.
Yeah, so thank you, Soumyadip ji. As someone who is working with urban governance and digital aspect of that for 2 decades, probably the journey of 2 decades is spanned in front of me in last hour or so. And I will seek forgiveness, but I thought it to be a bit simplistic cause-effect relations drawn out of the cyclone of activities that really went into urban India and the efforts of e-governance that happened. Because of course it's interesting and also amusing to know all the perspectives of and especially of our academic friends. It gives a very different perspective, and it is extremely important for us to understand the various frameworks that can be used to study what normally is a routine activity that we otherwise do and get entrapped by that. So I personally felt that a smart city is not about digital cities. Smartness is about using all possible resources, all possible ideas, all possible technologies, which may include digital technologies, to make the cities a better place to live. For me, that would be a very simplistic way of understanding smartness. Yes, use of digital technologies is inevitable in these times, but it is not to be equated with digital cities. That was the first really reaction I had. And of course, as digital is important of every aspect, it will also be an important aspect in running a city as well as various processes that a city does. Secondly, I sometimes feels that the way things are moving in 2020 or these current times, I think we require some new ontology, some new epistemology to study the rapid changes we are undergoing through, and maybe the conceptual frameworks that we had maybe of 1950 or 1900 may be falling short to explain the entirety of the complex situation that's going through, because things the way things are moving, it might be difficult to explain in what we otherwise call as the Newtonian billiards table universe of one ball hitting to another and then causing it to move. So causality may not be unilinear or monocausal, it will be multiple things happening simultaneously and affecting each other simultaneously, and outcomes then, as the quantum framework says, is essentially a probability. So probably the way things are moving, we might have to be a bit flexible to various aspects of how a city would respond. Thirdly, I think from maybe a social angle or the stratification angle, especially on digital divide, and I may like to share an example that we did when I was working as CEO Smart City and other 4 occasions of Municipal Commissioner. We had done a small project, I think I shared it earlier, for tribal hamlets in the eastern parts of the Sanjay Gandhi National Park, very, very close to Bhiwandi, which was referred by Madam in a talk. And it was a very simple study done. It was not a academic study per se, but done by my educational department teachers, where we got the data of 600 to 700 tribal families living in tribal hamlets of the Sanjay Gandhi National Park, the eastern rim near Thane. And just we studied the availability of smartphones or simple phones, whether they use it for what is it used for. And I found that the general availability of the technology and its use was as comparable to any other group of people in that part. So I do have my questions when the digital divide is stretched a bit. Of course, it is there, no point denying that. But if stretching it too far, I think would be a bit simplistic interpretation of that. Next, I think maybe the final part at the time, although my 20 decades, 2 decades can't be put into 2 minutes, but still, I would like to share that when we are looking at city, the process of city, what really ultimately matters is the connect of the city and the citizens. And therefore, technology being taken as something of a domineering, talks of digital dictatorship or over centralization or surveillance capitalism, or the other words which normally come up with the talks of digital vis-a-vis cities. I think it has a tremendous potential. It's a great projector and multiplier of human intents, but humanity obviously cannot replace human intents. And whatever human intents are, it would be a force multiplier for that human intent. So instead of blaming the technology, we had to think of probably a new, moral framework of keeping our thoughts, as has been tried for last millennia together, without probably great success. So technology is essentially a force multiplier, and it will be used for what we want it to be used. So that I think was a important part I felt would be always there. And of course, there are many detailing parts, a smaller part, but which can go on for the various technologies which are coming, the use it is being put for, whether the consultants are using it or not. I personally feel that, in the collaborative framework, consultants, and of course, this is more of a bureaucrat's approach that, there is a bit of envy with the consultants, with if I, maybe sometimes you always find that they tend to be, in control of situation, which I personally disagree with. We have to use all possible resources. It may be consultant, it may be a political person, it may be a social activist, it may be media, it may be RTI complaint, whoever will have to be incorporated into the process of the city development, because we cannot be prejudiced against anyone's views or anyone's abilities to contribute to the city. And technology per se will of course be an important part. Digital technology will also be an important part. Certain illustrations were made of smart city and the command control centers and the dashboards and GIS and remote control walls and robotics eventually. I think this detailing will of course continue. But if you want to place all these digital the technical details in a broader framework, I feel that we will have to have a new morality which will compensate for the technological projection of human intents, so that the cities are human, cities remain inclusive, and the challenges of sustainability or other challenges that we might be facing of health, of water, of sanitation, of mobility, of carbon, whatever. I think all these are part of details, and the broader framework would always be to have a morality for technology also. And progressively, I think ultimately inclusion is inevitable. We will ought to have inclusions, and technology will always help inclusion and not the other way around. So, Soumyadip ji, I think I will stop here with whatever broad reactions I had. Of course, they are, as you say, not very theoretically sound, or maybe not properly placed in a framework. But I think it was very interesting to hear Professor Datta. It was very good talk, and I think I learned a lot of ideas while listening to her, and also our other discussions when the points they were raising. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Null. It's always nice to hear from someone like you who have experience of running or managing a city for the last 2 decades or so. So now it's over to Professor Ayona for your responses to the comments which have been discussed by our panelists. And also I'm seeing there are 3 entities in the Q&A box. So, but essentially these are not questions, rather these are comments. So if you may see those comments, and if you want, you may respond. So it's over to you, Professor Ayona.
Right. Thank you so much for all your feedback and comments, and really hugely useful because I'm also thinking through this at the same time. But also, I mean, I just wanted to start off saying that I don't disagree with any of the comments. I mean, this is all, obviously my talk is condensed in half an hour, and there's a huge amount of stuff that I'm drawing on and sort of making it concise and summarizing it. So in a sense, I don't disagree with anyone, but perhaps I can take the next 5 minutes, 5-10 minutes or so to just kind of elaborate on some of the comments made. So first of all, Tathagata Chatterji, thank you so much for your observations, and I really appreciate some of the questions you posed, some of the observations you posed, because those are things that we are thinking of right now in all of the cities that we've been looking at. And Anwesha is here today, and Anwesha and I have been working in two of our projects on these smaller cities. So firstly. Tathagata, you were asking about what it means to urban local bodies when knowledge is produced and managed by consultants. I touched upon this slightly, but I think, I mean, and again, this is based on what we've been finding out rather than, kind of universal observation. But I think one of the key things that comes out of this process is path dependency. Because the consultants are the professionals. They are the ones who actually know how to run these systems. They are the ones who create that data, put that data on these platforms, and therefore they become kind of really key to the municipal governance. Without them, the municipal commissioners or the civil servants do not necessarily know how to interpret a lot of these with kind of confidence. Some of them do, but the capacity training that needs to actually happen in the municipalities was, at the time that we were there, it was really in the process. So when the ICCC was built, they began to train some of the police officials there, some of the other civil servants, in order to actually how to read the feed that is coming into the ICCC, how to actually issue the challans, for example. So those kinds of things, they are a longer process, much longer process than actually fitting out something and then just going away. So the consultants remain involved in the process. And actually, what happens is by the time it is installed, many of these technologies become obscure. So in one case, we were told that they bought all of these CCTV cameras, but by the time they managed to get all the approvals, and I haven't even yet gone into the governance of how these approvals happen. It's a very long process, but by the time the approvals came through, they found out that a new technology has come into place with these CCTV cameras, but they had to install what they had already bought. So it goes back again to the question of time as well. So the temporality of all of this is very kind of fraught, to say the least. But really, I think the summary answer to that question is a path dependency, and it's not really clear yet what that will be in the future, because these are still early days particularly in terms of the smart cities implementation. But we can already see that this is happening, and it is happening in a context in which civil servants are continuously transferred. So you have a situation of a municipal government where training has happened, and then this municipal commissioner who's very liked, well liked, and we heard from a lot of civil society actors that this guy was doing a lot of great things, and then the next year he's transferred. So all of that knowledge that is being given to the municipal government is lost, because knowledge rests with people. And if people change, keep switching all the time, you have another new person coming who has to relearn all of this. So where does that lead the professional? Where do they, how long do they stick around? So there is that question. Then there is the question of centralization. And again, I totally agree. There is a lot of centralization, and we heard this been said a lot that ULBs are becoming more implementers rather than decision makers. But the point about participation is, again, very true. Participatory process, I believe, is an ongoing process. It doesn't end at the point of commissioning the city. And that's where it was really visible, where the smart cities competitions started, when they actually had to put together the documentation saying that we have enabled in a participatory process. Now you can also unpack that process and critique it, but let's say participatory processes happened at the point of applying for smart cities funding. But it doesn't end there. And in many cities, it has actually ended there. Once they have the projects in place, the consultation process, the participatory process has been kind of stalled or broken. And that's leads to a loss of goodwill among citizens and civil society actors. So there's that. And then, of course, I just need to kind of say that smartness is not the same. Smart smartization or smart cities is not the same as digital cities or digitization. There are overlaps, but smart cities is a very small part of digitization, and digital cities are a very small part of smart cities. So there are overlaps, but they're not the same. So Anwesha, your point about the connection between smartness and digital futures is again very, very true. It is really interesting, and perhaps here's where I can bring in Samir and Hale's comments as well, because I think they're connected. Thank you very much for your comments. As I said, I don't know if you how you saw that it was a causal effect, because I was not arguing about a causal effect at all. I was arguing about a linked effect between digitalization and urbanization. They're not cause and effect at all. And sometimes they do run in parallel. But I think the question of the smart city is important here, because if smart is often seen in policy to be digital, it's because it has its legacy of a term that's been borrowed from a Western concept. The IBM smart cities, which came about, was about ubiquitous digitalization and governance and efficiency and management through digital platforms and infrastructures. And that's where also the ICCC concept came through. When it hits India, it becomes a localized concept, and rightfully so. And so the guidelines say that every city has its choice to decide how it will become smart. And so the digital aspect of it becomes smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And in fact, even after the projects are commissioned, you see in some cases the digitalization is removed altogether. But it doesn't take away from the fact that smart cities is a concept that has come from the West in this case. It's not a locally bred concept, although it's been translated locally. And therefore, the kind of the digital nature of it is there always. It has always been there, even in the competition. A lot of the participatory processes highlighted several suggestions for cities, but some of those were not taken up in projects because they didn't have a digital component in order to solve them. So that's where I think we do need to think about digital when we think about smart, but not necessarily as a cause and effect or necessarily as one or the same. They are separate processes because digitalization of governance is a whole new process than making a digital city or a smart city. And so that leads me nicely on to Surajit. Surajit, thank you so much for your comments. And again, I don't really disagree with any of them. I don't think you were disagreeing either with me. This is about, sort of detailing and enriching what I already said. With the GIS, yes, the power of the visual is definitely there. And that's what I was suggesting as well. It enables the state, but also the professionals, also the urban elite to see and engage in processes of saying, well, I don't want that here near my neighborhood. So that also happens. But I think the GIS also is in itself very fraught because I mean, as we found out when we were doing this kind of historiography of the city, because we felt it was really important to understand how the kind of socio-demographic profile has changed with the kind of physical geography of it. What we realized is it's very difficult to do, very difficult to achieve continuity between different decades, because even though the census data is there, even though the kind of physical infrastructure is there, the ward boundaries have changed. And when the ward boundaries change, you cannot say that things have changed because the boundaries, the geography itself changed. The kind of ontological reality of the geography has changed. So the data sets that it generates then becomes, creates a lot of tension with the histories of the data that was there before, because you can say, well, look, we've done a born digital data, we've done like this laser surveys, etc. And this is the truth, because all of that has happened before cannot be verified because everything has changed over the years. And it becomes then a way of negotiating of the kind of what is the truth. And if that is the truth, then this is how we need to address it. So that politics of information infrastructures becomes even more fraught when there isn't consistency in the geographies of the city itself over very many decades. And then therefore digital can occupy that space, which then makes it really, really legitimate. So yeah, in a sense, it's not new, but it also, what it does is it creates the kind of intensity and the politics of legitimacy. It makes it much more complicated when the kind of GIS data comes in. And the asynchronicity, yes, again, the asynchronicity between data and reality has always been there. If you see colonial maps, colonial railways, colonial, ways of mapping and knowledge as power, you see there are things left out. You see there are things there. You see earlier maps where slums were, just kind of empty space. Yes, that's there. But I think it's not necessarily a problem with tech, but at the same time, going back to what I said before, the sense that mapping with digital will make it really fast is what makes it even more asynchronous. So, and that leads also to your point about the automation of planning. Yes, there is this question, and I think the question of bringing in digital was highly valorized because digital would make planning faster, more seamless, more transparent, less corrupt, all of that. So the notion of speed is inherently embedded in the notion of digital infrastructure. And that's where I think the asynchronicity becomes even more pronounced when you see the advent of digital systems and digital platforms. So the idea of automated planning was that it would give speedy approvals within 5 days, because you're doing everything online. And so it's transparent, people can see that no corruption has happened, et cetera, et cetera. But of course, it doesn't always work like that, as we all know. And then finally, the point about digital territorial margins, whether this is peripheral marginalization, whether there's an outer core. And this is an idea that we're still developing, looking at the digitization of peripheries, regional features. And I think so far as we've got, I would argue it's a kind of nested periphery. I think we need to think about peripheries as nested. So you have the periphery within the city, which are the slums, informal settlements. They are a periphery within the core. They're also digital peripheries within the core, because you may not have access to mobile network, even though you might have a mobile phone. You may not know how to use these apps, even though you have the app installed, etc. But you may also have the urban periphery where the infrastructure hasn't reached yet. But let's say again, let's take the example of Bhiwandi. Bhiwandi is a really good case of that nested periphery. Bhiwandi has been bypassed for a very long time by the MMRDA regional development plan. All the other cities get investment, Bhiwandi doesn't, it loses out, it has these powerloom sectors. But what we're seeing now is a periphery of this periphery. So Bhiwandi has remained peripheral to the MMRDA region, but Bhiwandi has its own periphery of this agricultural hinterland. That actually is gaining, and again, you asked this question, are there winners? I don't know, whether I want to see it as a binary of winners and losers, but these village panchayats around Bhiwandi are gaining because these are where the e-commerce warehouses are going, because it's easier for them to get permission to get there into the villages than actually putting themselves in the Bhiwandi metropolitan area. And so the panchayats have gained a lot by giving their land away. But who have not gained is the agricultural community, because their land's been taken away, or they have sold it for really low quality, low grade, precarious service sector work in these e-warehouses. So there are no winners and losers. There are all sorts of shades in between. But I think I would argue that these are nested peripheries. There are peripheries within peripheries and peripheries within cores and cores within peripheries that we see. And it's far more complicated than, geographically saying this is the core and that's the periphery, and let's try and fit them there. So yeah, and like you said, of course, the digital margin and the territorial margin do not necessarily always overlap. You see in the peripheries, in Bhiwandi also, there are, very strong elite digital access. Yeah, I think I'll leave it there. I hope I've answered and addressed all the feedback and comments, but if there's anything, please come back to me.
Yes, if you also please can see some of the one in Q&A section, there is one specific comments by K.T. Ravindran that's about this marketer colonialism, industrial colonialism, and digital mercantile colonialism. And the second question from is, I think, Anushree Gupta. It's about Bhiwandi experience and how the presence of these e-commerce houses impact the process of this entire digitalization and urbanization. So your quick thoughts on it.
And there's another one before as well about Korea. I mean, I don't know anything about Korea. I don't know if Korea is the model here, whether it should be the model here. I know about Taiwan. Taiwan is claimed as they are fully digitalized, but as I know from my collaborators and work we're doing in Taiwan, they're not. They're having so much trouble with paper, the paper from the kind of Japanese and Chinese occupation, which is creating a lot of conflicts with their full GIS digitalization of municipalities. Katie, yes, I agree with you, definitely. I don't know if I can add anything to this. So I don't know whether I want to put labels of mercantile or industrial or it's all sorts. But yes, we may have come full circle and going around in circles. I'm not sure, but yes, I agree with you, Katie. Honestly, I have a question regarding a brief mention of the presence of e-commerce platform warehouse. I want to know how their presence in particular impacts the processes of digitalization and urbanization. Right, okay, and that leads me also to think about one of Samir Unhale's point about whether we are kind of valorizing the digital divide. I would say not. I think the digital divide is not as simple as have and have not. It is more about the kind of layering again, and it's intersectional. So women, minority communities, class, these have strong impact on how people use the digital. And so going back to Anushrie's question about Bhiwandi, we did a survey with about 300 young women in Bhiwandi about the use of the mobile phone, and particularly in 2020, 2021, when you had the lockdowns. And what comes across is not that whether they have the phone or they don't have the phone, that what comes across is even if they have the phone, they're not allowed to use it because you have family, kinship, society, all of this having an impact on the power to use the phone and what you can do with the phone. And even if you have the phone, whether you have it in your own possession or not. So the digital divide is kind of really complex. It's not just whether you have a phone and whether you can use it or not. It's how you use the phone that determines your relationship then with the state or with the platform or with the global corporations. And in the context of Bhiwandi, that's related to Anushrie's question about the e-commerce platforms. So a lot of the young women that we surveyed do not want to work in these e-commerce platforms because of kind of the way the society is structured. It's kind of seen as not good work. So they really want to get work in other kinds of service sector. The e-commerce platforms, the e-commerce warehouses particularly, employ migrants. And this is the floating population who are not counted in the census. And the migrant workers who used to be initially men who used to come and work in the power looms have now realized that the e-commerce warehouses actually are very positive towards employing women. So now they're bringing the wives and daughters and sisters, etc., from their villages in Bihar and Orissa, etc., to work in these e-commerce warehouses. So you have a really high floating population supporting the economy of Bhiwandi with the power looms, and actually the economy of e-commerce in India in these warehouses. And this is something just really interesting, and you can't again see that as one thing leading to another. It's a kind of really long and complex set of processes, even around migration, migratory routes, etc., that leads to this sort of assemblage of people and assemblage of capital and assemblage of warehouses and making Bhiwandi like the node of e-commerce, node of Amazon delivery services. I don't know. I mean, in India, if you order from Amazon, I believe you see it's coming from Bhiwandi. I've been told by many of my collaborators that you get this notice that it's been assembled in Bhiwandi. So think about it, that labor, that gig work that's been done in these warehouses are a whole lot of floating population that relies on migratory routes. And that's also very highly gendered. That's all I can say right now. I mean, it is a continuous process. I don't know enough about it to say anymore.
So, no, yeah, thank you. And the topic today is so engaging, and you have covered so many complex issues within a very short period of time. And I think we need, maybe if your time permits, another full session on each of the issues which you have discussed so far in today's presentation. So it's really engaging, and the kind of discussion that we had today I think it's stimulating, and it gives us a much more food for thoughts, and we will hope to have some more discussion on these issues, because yeah, absolutely, because nobody of us knows what the future will hold, and how these cities and citizens, customers, and the governments will respond. And as through this digitalization, a new generation of solutions are actually emerging, and which require some kind of focused approach to unlock its true potential. Maybe a kind of balanced approach, which remains the key to managing the shift from this kind of centralized approach to a more citizen-centric, more decentralized model to unlock the full potential of this digitalization and its impact on this urbanization and urbanization. So once again, on behalf of this Impact and Policy Research Institute, I thank you. It's a wonderful opportunity to listen to you, and I'm really thankful to Professor Ayona Datta for his remarks, and also we are thankful to all the panelists today, Dr. Surajit Chakravrarty, Professor Tathagata Chatterji, Dr. Anwesha Aditi, Mr. Samir Unhale, and also we are thankful to all the thankful to all the attendees who are listening to us, and I'm seeing many of them. Yes, so they have joined. So they have also participated in our earlier program as panelists. So we look forward to have you in our future City Conversation series as well. So yes, so it's a wonderful opportunity for us to listen to you once again. We are very much thankful, and also we are thankful to all of us who have joined through online streaming, like Facebook and all the other online stuffs. So that's all from our end. So we are really thankful to once again to all of you. Yeah.
And thank you again to IMPRI and Soumyadip and all the panelists and attendees. Thanks for your questions. Thanks for your comments. I'm deeply grateful.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah.